All right. Hey, good morning. It is the Rise and Grind Morning Show. It's Wednesday today, is it not? I think it's Wednesday today. It's February 19th, 2025. I'm your host today, Will Rock, joined by our co-hosts Riley O'Brien and Eric Rintamaki. So today we've got a packed show. We've got Kelvin Shepard on the mic talking with Dan Miller. Want to highlight what he said. I think that he vindicated us again on some of the topics that we've been talking about, for well over a year now. And I think we're finally going to see a major change on this defense. So we're going to listen to that report by Dan Miller and Kelvin Shepard here in about, 30, 40 minutes. But NFL news, man. Kellen Moore. Why Nick Sirianni said what he said to Kellen Moore and why it's not working. But I also feel like this is something that maybe Dan Campbell doesn't do. And we'll talk about what exactly that is, about not stealing my coordinators. Don't steal my assistants, says Nick Sirianni. Netflix, they want more moolah. They want some more of this NFL action. We're going to talk about that. Also, we've got our first UFL report. It is going to be a weekly report until the season starts, and then we're going to ramp it up to some daily reports as the UFL kicks off. It's our first taste of football until the new NFL season. Finally, the NFL rescinds some fines. First time I've seen this happen, but I think it's an even bigger stage that was just set for why Joe Mixon and Will Anderson's fines being rescinded is a big message to the rest of the NFL. And then up next in Lions news, so we've got some former Detroit Lions obviously playing in the UFL. That is part of the UFL report today. We've got the Riley report coming up around 9 a.m. He's going to go around the league. Today is NFC North, so you don't want to miss that coming up at the power hour of 9 a.m. And then we've got Texas A&M edge Nick Scorton. Who is he mocked to right now? Does it make sense? Is he even gonna last that long in the draft? We're gonna find all that and much more about Lions news and rumors when we come back. We'll see you here in just a few moments.
Igniting the light through highs and lows, we'll stand as one. A legacy, a tale that's just begun. Together we roar, together we cry. Detroit Lions will rise, with a heart full of dreams and the fire in our eyes. From the past to the future, we'll claim our own.
All right, so we're back. Good morning, fellas. Eric, how are you today?
Really good. Got 6 inches of snow. It's -1 million, and the fire trucks just went out somewhere. So I'm doing good. Somebody else isn't.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. It's definitely freezing, man. If you guys hear my heater this morning, just let me know. I'll kick it off, but it's definitely loud. What's it like in Utah, man? What's the weather report over there?
Yeah, we're like mid 30s. It's
Oh,
not too bad.
That's swimsuit weather, man.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's been an unusual winter. It snowed like one time, so
Are you down in the
very-
valley-ish, or are you up towards the mountains?
yeah, I mean, we're right up next to the mountains, but I'm about 20 minutes south of the great city, Salt Lake City. So yeah, normally it's a white winter, but it hasn't been the case so far this year. I was going to take my niece sledding, haven't been able to even do that yet. So
Well, I'm sure you'll be able to get it in. They're not manufacturing snow up there, just like the Lions had to manufacture some pressure here in 2024, and why Kelvin Shepard says it's not going to happen again. So hopefully you get an opportunity to do it, right?
hope so.
All right, so let's kick it off this morning. I guess good morning to everybody in the chat. We'll start there. Lions Blood has some news today. He's having surgery, so hope that all goes well for you this morning. Good luck. He's in the waiting room, I think he said, or maybe he's laying in his gurney ready to go under the knife. But whatever it is, man, good luck for you this morning. Hope it all works out. Who else is joining us this morning? We've got Becky Cook in the house, Brandy Coffee, Attila Hardy, Jay-Z, moderators, Trace. I don't see Mike P yet this morning. Maybe he's off today. Hope him and his wife are doing well. And I don't see any other moderators. Oh, there's Mike. I see Mike in there now. We got J-Rod in the house, Theodorio Villarreal. Who else is in here? Peter Van Larhoven, Stella Eves, Brandy Coffee, Kevin Barr. And if I missed anybody else, it's not by purpose, but we're going to get the show rolling. Appreciate all of you guys and ladies. You are the best part of Rockhound Detroit Lions. Always have been, always will be. We don't do this without you. First up, let's get into Kellen Moore. So this I saw yesterday, and I thought that it was fitting, kind of Detroit Lions-ish news, but more so, I mean, is this going to be the way of the future for the NFL when, Nick Sirianni knew that Kellen Moore was being sought after for a head coaching opportunity, and obviously he needs to build a coaching staff, which can be very difficult, this late into the coaching cycle when you're one of the last two teams to be standing and everybody else seems to have been interviewed, and he declined to interview with anybody. He felt that it was more important to continue on with the job at hand, which was the season. That was the most important thing to Kellen Moore, and I have to give him, I would give him a standing ovation if I could, but that is the exact way I feel that you should handle this. Like, stay in the moment. Stay where your feet are. Don't get too far left or right. You get off center, and things happen like it did for the Lions in the Commanders game. I felt like there was just too much commotion, and it derailed. It completely derailed our team. And whether you agree or disagree, I feel that was one of the biggest reasons why our season ended the way it did. That game was so out of control from the start, and I feel like they just weren't prepared. But anyway, Kellen Moore is 36 years old. He's a first-time head coach now for the Saints, and looking to the Eagles for coaching staff for hires was something that Nick Sirianni sent a very clear message to Kellen Moore about. And he's, taking Eagles coaches. He strongly advised not to do that. Now, Sirianni was asked, about the assistant coach, like, Moore taking staff members with him. And obviously, Nick Sirianni said that, the process of some guys leaving, it happens, but ultimately, it's still his and the Eagles staff. And this is where he was quoted as saying, quote, "I don't let that happen usually, but sometimes you can't help it. Just like Frank said to me, this is my staff, and you can't have these guys. It's hard to build the staff and have that continuity in there, but there's sometimes you can't." Like the Nick Rallis situation. He had the opportunity to go and be promoted, and that's the way the rules are now. Every situation is a little different, but my general thought on that is this is my and the Philadelphia Eagles staff, end quote. Basically saying hands off. Like, I built this. We created this, not you. Don't be plucking my coaches and my assistants. Go do your own work. Go build your own team. And yeah, I'm a little hot about it because I feel like Dan Campbell put all of this work in to create such an amazing staff for the first 4 seasons as a head coach for the Detroit Lions, and they all got plucked away. Now, we expected Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson to move on, and I think that that's absolutely amazing that they did. I think that it's incredible, that Dan Campbell has now 2 head coaches from his coaching tree in 4 years, and there's more to come. But is this more of like a gentleman's thing, a gentleman's handshake type thing where it's, hey, coach, I really appreciate you doing this for me and putting me in this position to win and be a coach in the NFL. I'm not going to take your staff. I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't stab you in the back. Should it be that way? Or it is what it is. Now, when coaches are moving on because they're getting elevated in their position, maybe going from defensive coordinator to head coach, or maybe even an assistant goes all the way to head coach, which has happened. Some things you can't stop, and some of those things you wouldn't stop. But I think what Nick Sirianni is saying here is, I did this. This is my staff. Go do it yourself. We all have to start somewhere, but you're not starting with my staff. Now, clearly that really hasn't happened. Kellen Moore has obviously interviewed with some of this, former Eagles staff and trying to create them into Saints staff. Now, I don't know the full details on how many have gone to the Saints just yet. But there was one name, and that was Doug Nussmeier, is one of the, at the time of this article, was one of the potential candidates from Sirianni's staff to join Kellen Moore in New Orleans. Now, I don't know if that has actually happened. This was dated all the way back on February 11th, and like I said, I just caught wind of it last night, and I wanted to get your guys' take. Eric, I'm going to start with you first. Do you feel like, the NFL has clear rules? I mean, I know that they have some rules set aside for this, but do you feel like there should be less poaching going on when these guys move on?
Well, lateral moves, the team with the person can block it. So right. If Sirianni says, I don't want you taking my defensive coordinator, you can't have him. Now, if you're taking a defensive assistant and making him your defensive coordinator, or a linebackers coach and making him your DC, Sirianni can't stop him. So as long as it's a promotion, they can't be stopped. But if it's a lateral move or a move down, then they can't be stopped. And I think that's one reason that Dan Campbell now is giving coaches like Hank Fraley, now he's the running back coordinator, and Scotty Montgomery is the assistant head coach and the wide receivers coach. So they're giving them some more titles, so it's a little harder for them to make a lateral move. It's got to be a move up.
So upon further digging here, we do know that the Eagles run game specialist and assistant offensive line coach, TJ Paganetti, is joining Kellen Moore in New Orleans. So at least one has gone. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know the gravity of the rest of the situation on how many have left. But again, this article was more so to point out, and this is by Joseph Grassano, Fansided, by the way, to really just kind of point out that I feel like there needs to be more of a gentleman's handshake here. Like, just, leave these guys alone. But to your point, I mean, the rules are clear, and if it's an elevation, can't do anything about it. If it's a lateral move, I feel like those should be left alone. If you want to leave your team, then great, quit. Quit and then get rehired. But I think that you should quit first, and that way you don't get, I don't know what happens with their contracts. I don't think they continue to get paid. If they get poached, I think that new contract obviously takes precedence over the old contract. But anyway, what's up next here for NFL news, Eric? What's happening with Netflix?
All right. Netflix wants a Sunday afternoon NFL package. The Christmas Day streaming of the NFL games was not enough of a taste for Netflix to now want more NFL games for the streaming service giant. Netflix announced this week it is eyeing Sunday afternoon games in the near future. And I found this little article from Yahoo Sports, and it says the NFL's looming development of a full-blown Sunday morning international package had some thinking that Netflix, given its global footprint, would be interested. But Netflix is thinking bigger than the low-profile, small audience slate. much bigger. So someone from Netflix said that the company is interested in bidding on the NFL's Sunday afternoon games. The Sunday afternoon games currently belong to CBS and Fox. Fox acquired the NFC package from CBS in 1994, and CBS snatched the AFC package from NBC in 1998. The current broadcast deals run through 2023. The league has the right to pull the plug on the deals 4 years early, which would mean 2029. And it likely will. So the major shakeup could be coming, with Netflix becoming a very major player in the NFL broadcast landscape. And if it is in Netflix, one of the current partners will be out, or at best relegated to Sunday mornings. So all the people that were so mad about Netflix streaming the Christmas Day games, man, they would be really upset if Netflix ends up getting the afternoon slate of either NFC or AFC games.
Interesting. So I couldn't really pay attention to all of that. I see I'm having a connection issue. My bit stream, the bits to the stream are really low, so I'm trying to fix it. But why don't you guys go ahead and just conversate it up about this Netflix deal between you and Riley for a moment while I get this handled.
So Riley, what would you think of Netflix taking over the NFC and you happen to have a Netflix subscription?
I would love it, just on the standpoint of I've got to pay the $300 a year just to watch the Lions games. I get the Sunday ticket, and then when the team's good, as they have been, like this year, I think 8 or 9 of the games were on TV, or national or local TV, and so when that happens, right, they black it out. So basically, I was paying twice the price tag for each game because I didn't need Sunday ticket for half of the season. So, but I think if I'm not mistaken, I dumped my Netflix account a little while ago. So either way, I got to spend some money, right? Sign up for a new subscription. But however I can get the Lions games, I'm all for. So I don't know. I think most of our audience is probably out there in Michigan, where you guys have the games just by default, right?
Yeah, like I have DirecTV, but I pay like $200 a month for DirecTV. I've had it for 30 years.
Sure, yeah.
And, so mine, it just automatically records. But then I had to have Amazon Prime to get the Thursday night games.
Right.
And then there was some other service to get one of the other games. And it's just... How much more are we going to have to pay to watch all these games? Because I know a lot of people just watch it over the air broadcast TV. But I really believe the NFL in its next model is going to catch up, and it's going to be a la carte. You were going to pay per game, and it's all going to be streaming on every service, is what I believe. I think they're going to divvy it up amongst all of them and make them all pay to stream every single game. So you'll be able to have Netflix and stream every single game, but you pay for each game that you watch. That's what I kind of see happening in the future someday.
Yeah, I would not be opposed to that. If I had the option just on a Sunday, if the Lions are being shown locally here in Utah, I wouldn't need it. But on those other days and those other weeks and games, yeah, I'd pay $20, no problem, just to watch that, that individual game. But obviously don't need it for Sunday night season opener. And then they played on Monday night against Seattle, so like I said, I knew early in the schedule, I'm like, I'm paying for the full price for Sunday ticket. But 3, 4, 5 years ago, the only time I would have otherwise been able to watch the Lions was on Thanksgiving. And so it's pick your battle, right?
So I don't know about all the out of market issues that exist, but I know for me, like I bought a $70 antenna, right? Just to throw it up in the studio to connect it to the TV, and then it goes up in the attic just to catch whatever, but it's connected to the internet, right? We have all of these different subscriptions, and I've tried all of them. So NFL Plus doesn't seem to work half the time. You can't get certain games on, even though it says it's on, it's not on. We have Prime, so obviously that takes care of some Thursday night, games. And then they forced us to download or use Tubi for the Super Bowl. And then you also have, what was the other one that was used this year? Peacock. Yeah, we got the Peacock thing going. So they're trying to force people to buy all of these subscriptions. And 20 some odd years ago, it's crazy because I went to one of my friends. I said, wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could just kind of pick whatever stations you want and only pay for those? Like, okay, great. You're going to give me a silver bundle with 150 channels, but maybe I only watch 20 of them. Why do I want to pay for all these extra ones? And so way before Netflix I was already thinking of a way to make it happen. And then streaming came. And it's kind of interesting now when, streaming was the thing. It's like, cut the cable, cut the cord, right, as they say, and just go to streaming. But now it's more expensive. It's more expensive than cable.
Yeah.
And I think it's driving the prices down of having cable. So at some point, it's going to be more advantageous just to go back to cable. Unless you need Netflix, or whatever, streaming apps for movies. But I'm finding now that the prices are so low with cable, it almost even makes sense. But Netflix, I'm not surprised that they want more. They want more action. I mean, it's a big money maker. They just got to be able to handle the amount of people that are watching. There's some issues last year with stream quality. So next topic here in NFL news, we're going to be talking about these penalties, big fines that were levied against Joe Mixon and Will Anderson. So after the Texans lost to the Chiefs, obviously a lot of Texans were not happy. And a couple of them, Joe Mixon and Will Anderson, stepped up to the podium, said their piece, saying that, obviously the refs were part of the problem here, or the biggest part of the problem. NFL didn't like that. They don't want these refs to be criticized. And I feel like that was the moment that kind of started, the whole cheat peed. And I mean, it was before that. We already had problems with the refs and the Chiefs, but it kind of started, I think, this narrative for the rest of the playoffs where the NFL was on the defense. Like they were kind of pushed back into their seat a little bit saying, oh boy, these players just came out and said that the refs were a problem. We can't have that. We're going to fine them. Hopefully it shuts them up. Taking their First Amendment away. I don't see how that's even a thing. I don't even know how they can get away with it. Like you should be able to say whatever you want, whenever you want. I understand that you work for the NFL, just like if you would work for any other company, they may not want you to say certain things about the company or about, your employer. And if you do, you can lose your job, whatever. I get it. You signed up for that. But just coming to the mic and saying, quote by Will Anderson, we knew it was going to be us versus the refs going into this game. Okay. That could be taken in so many different directions. Okay, maybe they thought our style of play does not fit well with how the refs have been calling their games this season. So we've got, this set of refs that is going to be governing this game, and they call these penalties more often than not. Just so happens we're very aggressive in that area, and we know. So if I were to take his statement and kind of turn it into something else, we know our style of defense doesn't fit well with these refs in this game. Now, if he would have said that, probably would have been no issue. But it's because he didn't say something like that, they slapped a $25,000 fine on him. But he also went on to say, or Mixon went on to say that everybody knows how it is playing up there. He says you can never leave it into the ref's hands. The whole world sees, man, what it is. When it comes down to it, you can never leave it in the ref's hands. It's all good, though. I didn't see anything. I didn't take anything from this that was, an egregious attack towards the refs. I think what he's saying here is, yeah, we have to take care of business, right? We've got to put points up. We've got to keep points off the board. And if we do that, then we remove the element of the ref. Meaning if somebody does something, they get a flag, it's not going to hurt as much because we've already, taken a lead of 15, 20 points, whatever it is, into the fourth quarter. You could take it that way. Or said another way, when going to Kansas City, we know what it is, playing up there, meaning yeah, the refs have by and large given the Chiefs a pass the entire season. They've made some very egregious calls that have hurt many teams, not just the Texans. But the good news is this. Mixon and Will Anderson both had their appeals upheld in whatever court they use. I don't think it's the NFLPA, but whatever they use, that facilitator said, yeah, I don't think that you said anything negatively about the refs. And so now those fines have been rescinded by the NFL. So let me go back in this article just a little bit. So it was Texans running back Joe Mixon that won his appeal, $25,000 fine that was followed the playoff loss to the Chiefs. Now, the appeals officer, Chris Palmer, explained it in a letter to Mixon that after going through the hearing process on January 30, found that Mixon, quote, did not necessarily publicly criticize the officials, end quote. And then here was his quote to Mixon in this letter of overturning the decision. So he says, quote, during the appeal hearing, you stated what you meant by your statements referring to the officials. I wish that we had that. I haven't seen that posted publicly. He went on to say, as you know, statements can be interpreted differently by every individual, and it seems like you clearly understand the weight and detriment of public criticism towards officials can be. However, given how impactful your platform is as a player, which I appreciate, end quote. What did he say? I want to know what Mixon said, during this Court of Appeals finding. So it's interesting to me that now the left shoe dropped, right? The right shoe dropped. 2 big fines have been rescinded by the NFL. And I feel like this finally has set a precedent for NFL players to start voicing their opinions a little bit more. I'll close with this and then I'll get your opinions. Mixon said this, quote, so let me get this straight. The NFL fines me $25,000 for something I didn't even say. Call them out for it, and their response was fine me again for something that's not even a violation without even rescinding the first one. Where's the accountability? Just respect the players, end quote. Eric, I'll start with you. Do you feel like this is a bigger issue in the NFL where players can't voice their opinions? And when they do, I mean, obviously this is what they're up against, is big fines. And do you feel like that it is a detriment to the game of football, especially in the NFL, where scrutiny has been levied, wholly on these refs for a long time, especially with the Chiefs' involvement? What is your opinion on this? And where do you think it goes from here?
Yeah, I think everyone noticed that the reffing was not fishy in the Super Bowl, except for the first 2 calls. But other than that, I mean, they finally called a fair and even game, and look what happened. The Chiefs got smoked, and this has turned into a saga with Joe Mixon. It's happened to him twice now that he's gotten fined, and both times got rescinded, taken away. And I think the guy's just voicing his opinion. But I can tell you one thing, the last company that I worked for, if I was to so much as say, man, that guy sitting over at table 3 was so stinky today, I would get fired. You weren't allowed to talk anything bad about any customer, about the company itself. You weren't even allowed to mention the company in a personal Facebook post without their permission. That's how crazy controlling they were. And so I can only understand a multi-billion-dollar company, but you want to know what they did? They opened a can of worms. They opened Pandora's box, because now none of them are going to stop.
I hope that's what happens. I hope that some of these NFL players voice their opinions a little bit more. I guess what I would say is educate yourself on how to use some powerful and impactful words that aren't going to get you in trouble. You just got to be sneaky with it, but at the same time, I don't think that these guys should be held underneath the thumb of the NFL and how they feel the game went. If you feel that the refs made a bad call, you should have every right to say, I feel that the call was bad. I'm not saying this, ref should be fired, or this ref is, betting on the Chiefs, or this ref is in the Chiefs' back pocket. No, he made a bad call. you should be able to say that, but going the other direction, yeah, leave that up to the tinfoil guys on Monday morning. We'll take care of the rest of it. But let's not, take these guys' First Amendment away from them where they can't verbally say what they feel about the game. Riley, what did you think?
Yeah, I can't think of another instance where, and I'm sure it's happened, but I couldn't think of another instance where a fine like this was rescinded. So I think I'm happy for those guys, man. It's post game. It's when the emotions are hottest. We see all the time reporters ask stupid questions a lot of the time, and they're frustrated. They're professionals. There's a lot of money on the line. They're so competitive. And you're playing with fire a little bit, and we don't want these guys, just like I think what you're saying, Will, we don't want them to just put a muzzle on and just say a one-word response so that they don't get fined. Sets a new precedence for sure, but I'm happy that those guys, appealed, and rightfully so, and got their money back. That's a lot of money. These guys make a lot of money, but that's a lot of money for a comment that was misinterpreted.
Yeah, I mean, I think you used a great word there, muzzle. Like, why are we putting a muzzle on these guys?
Otherwise, just don't interview them.
Yeah, I think that's a great word to describe what the NFL is trying to do. But furthermore, yeah, that is a ton of money. When you think about what 25 grand is, yeah, it may not be much to somebody that makes a few $1 million a year. That might be, a Friday night dinner with, a dozen of their friends. But for the majority of the world, I mean, that 25K is about half of your average household income. What are they doing with the money? I know they supposedly put it towards some foundations and that, but what are they really doing with the money? Where's the transparency there? I would like to know where it all goes. Because I feel like it's not. I feel like they're just finding these guys left and right for no other reason than they just don't want their NFL talked about negatively. But anyway, let's move on to our first segment of the season here on the UFL. So, Eric, we have watched the UFL really, really grow, and a lot of us feel the transparency level from the UFL would be welcomed. I mean, open arms by NFL fans that have actually watched a game or two and see how these refs interact with the coaches, with the players, with the audience. And I would love to see the NFL adopt some of this stuff. It probably will never happen. It's wishful thinking. But there's some rule changes for 2025. Walk us through what's going on in the UFL.
Yeah, so the UFL's training camp is only about 9 days away now. And I've been following the UFL news and the Michigan Panthers and what's going on. And right now the UFL has changed some rules for the 2025 season. In 2025, they're bringing some big changes to the UFL. For starters, the UFL is reverting back to the XFL NFL style of kickoff. So they will have the landing zone and everything just like the NFL. They want to be just like the NFL is and be progressive in not having so many concussions and looking out for player safety. So they are trying the XFL NFL style kickoff again, because last year they were in the regular kickoff. Second is the challenge rules for the coaches, which will now include, if a challenge is successful, the team will be permitted a second challenge, just like the NFL. Subject to normal rules, a third challenge is never permitted. So if they get one right, they get a second one. And then there are other minor ones, like replay can now be used to disqualify a player, or if a foul is called for intentional grounding and there is clear and obvious video evidence that the passer was out of the pocket area or not facing an imminent loss of yardage, they can overrule it from above right away. And that's something they've been doing, but just not with intentional grounding. But most of the changes related to the new kickoff and clarifying other rules, while most of the rule changes are minor, the UFL is definitely trying to be more like the NFL when it comes to kickoffs. And the UFL really wants to be a testing ground for the NFL. So like with spotting the ball with, I can't remember the name of theirs, but they already don't have to bring in the chain gang because it's all done with lasers and sensors in the ball. So as soon as the ref spots the ball, they know whether it's a first down or not, and they know whether it's by an inch or whether it's by 3 inches, how far it's short, everything. There's no muss, no fuss. And then when there is a penalty, they look at it right away by the sky judge. He says, "Oh, that's not a penalty. On to the next game, pick up the flag." And you can hear the ref saying that to the referee down on the field, and everything is open, honest. You get to hear everything. You get to see everything. Everything they look at back in New York, you actually get to see in New York, them at their consoles looking at the screen. So I think it's something that, if it keeps going, could be something very big for the UFL. And I was doing a little digging last night on the UFL and how it's not quite gained the popularity that they thought it was going to gain in its first year. Well, one thing that's missing is fantasy football. They don't have a fantasy football. You can't set up a fantasy football league yet because ESPN, the biggest fantasy football company in the world, has not set up the UFL for fantasy football yet, which I think could make them some money. And I think that could really help the league. Well, last night I signed up for my very first UFL fantasy football league. So we'll see if it happens or not, but it should make it a little more fun having it where you can actually have some skin in the game, not necessarily gambling, but it makes you follow the players of each team and not just necessarily just your team. Because I'm a Michigan Panthers fan. I was looking on Ticketmaster. You can get season tickets right now. It's $250 for 5 games. So it's really cheap, about $50 a ticket. And I know they're going to have single game tickets as low as $20 as soon as they start doing the single game tickets. And they have quite a few tickets left, actually. And I went and looked, but I am trying for sure to go to the home opener on April 4th. And
Okay,
then,
so let's digress this a minute here. So the UFL rule changes were what exactly?
that they're going to the XFL style kickoff.
Uh-huh.
And then they are going to 2 challenges because they only had 1 before.
Right.
And then everything else is minor, like disqualification of a player can be done from upstairs. And then intentional grounding can be ruled on from upstairs.
Intentional grounding. So they're going to be able to get another look at that. So if the refs make that call on the field and someone disagrees with it,
Yep.
they can replay it and take a look at it upstairs.
Yeah, and overturn it.
Okay. I see now that where this is going on in the screen. I'm trying to fix it. So I just got to re-download a file. So outside of that, I mean, it doesn't sound like there's really a ton of changes.
Nope.
So, I mean, how do you feel like these changes are going to affect, going back to the XFL, NFL style kick? That's confusing to me. So they're going to what the NFL is using now?
Yes. And I think
last year they weren't using it?
Nope. Last year they did not. They were doing a traditional kickoff. And I think the reason they're doing it is because they want to be a farm system for the NFL.
Yeah, I think they're just I thought that they were already using it. So that's a little baffling to me that I thought that they were using that last year. Yep. And I could have sworn they were using it last year.
And it's strange because the XFL is where that kickoff came from.
Right. Well, that's all merged now into one thing.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess let's get into the next UFL portion here, or report.
Sure. Yeah. So with training camp in 10 days, here are a list of former Lions that will be suiting up for this UFL season. As Lions fans, you may recognize more than a few of these names. So there's 8 teams, and we're going to start with the Birmingham Stallions. They have tight end Jordan Thomas, Jerron Jones. He's an offensive tackle. Guard Matt Farniak, Defensive tackle Demetrius Taylor. There's one I remember. Cornerback Stephen Gilmore. We all remember him. Cornerback Rashad Wildgoose, and safety Juju Hughes. There's a couple from not so long ago. And then the next team is the San Antonio Brahmas, and they have a couple with wide receiver Jawan Green, tight end Elise Mack, linebacker Tavante Beckett, linebacker Rashad Berry, and cornerback Darius Phillips, along with safety Jalen Elliott. The Arlington Renegades have QB Luis Perez, and he is awesome in the UFL. The Arlington Renegades won the championship last year, and it was because of Perez. Defensive end Will Clark, cornerback Jamar Summers, and safety Brady Breeze. The Houston Roughnecks have offensive tackle Ryan Pope, defensive tackle Olive Sagapolu, and then cornerback Colby Richardson, and cornerback, everybody's favorite, Corn Elder. The Memphis Showboats have Jonathan Adams, defensive tackle John Atkins, linebacker Steel Chambers. We remember him from last year or the year before.
That's the coolest name ever. I'm sorry. Steel Chambers.
It is.
Whenever I hear that name, it brings me back to Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. I don't know why, but that's just what pops in my head. Every time I hear that name, all I think of is Wu-Tang, Wu-Tang. That's all I can hear.
Yeah. And then the Memphis Showboats' last one is cornerback Mark Gilbert. And then the DC Defenders have quarterback Jordan Tamu. Okay. And then offensive tackle Jared Williams, kicker Matt McCrane. Wow, there's a reach for us. And then the St. Louis Battlehawks have wide receiver Denzel Mims. If you remember, we traded for him from the Jets.
Wow.
And then cornerback Chris Peyton Jones. And then last but not least, your Michigan Panthers with guard Jake Burton from just a few years ago off the Lion squad. So there are quite a few ex-Lions. I'm going to say 30 or 40 of them here on XFL squads. So not bad showing there, Detroit Lions.
That's a lot of players. I'm surprised in Mims. I'm surprised that he, maybe he's just trying to get some work in. He didn't play with the UFL last year, right? I don't think he did.
No, I don't think so.
He bounced around a little bit after the Lions let him go. So, yeah, interesting. That's a lot of former Lions. One of the names that popped up to me was Juju Hughes. So, again, a lot of work that I do here is research. And when I talk about Brad Holmes' tree of free agents, we spoke about it the other night, and I put a video out of these free agents that Brad Holmes probably will have high interest in. There's about a list of 20 names. And when you look at the free agents on his list, now I haven't done anything past 2020 because it's all former players that Brad Holmes has looked at or worked with or had pre-combine visits with, pre-draft visits with when he was a Ram. So players that you're seeing that are now former Lions players, I mean, a lot of these guys are on that list, and I find it, I don't want to say funny, but it's interesting that Brad has identified all of these players before and they became Detroit Lions at one point, or some of them have, that were former Ram, either UDFAs or drafted or just brought in for visits prior to the draft and the combine. So it's interesting. You guys got to keep your ears to the ground on that one. All right, moving on. We've got the Riley Report coming up here at 9 o'clock. We're going to do that when we get back. I don't know how we're doing on likes. Got about 90 in the stream. Looks like we have 51 likes. We're going to take a 30-second ad break. If you guys can add, 24 likes, or at least get us to 75% by 9 a.m., we will turn the ads off so you don't have to worry about these stupid ads rolling up anymore. So jump out while we're taking an ad break. Smash the like button. We'll be right back.
Every day, thousands of people are discovering YOOPERLITES. Michigan's newest, funnest rock to go find on the shores of the Great Lakes. Don't go out with just any light. Try the Convoy C8 from YOOPERLITES.com. It's guaranteed for life, and you'll find all the ones everyone else misses. Quality UV lights that are perfect for YOOPERLITES with prices starting as low as $20. Please make sure to visit YOOPERLITES.com for all your UV flashlight needs with the best guarantees on the market. Just what you wanted and not what you didn't. The best quality, the best guarantees, and the best UV flashlights from YOOPERLITES.com.
All right, so quick update. Coming up here tomorrow, we are going to have our first NFL draft interview. So we have a special guest that'll be joining us tomorrow morning at the 9 a.m. hour. He has just declared for the NFL draft, but he's also thrown his hat into the CFL as well as the UFL. And you guys will learn who he is tomorrow morning, so you might want to tune in and tell your friends. I've watched some of this guy's tape. I think he's extremely impressive. We'll see where it goes for him in the NFL draft. I mean, hopefully we learn a lot, but the reason why I'm bringing him in, more so less football, right? It's his story. It's a story that I read on this guy. And that's what I want to highlight, because this channel is not just about football, right? I mean, that's the main thing that we do here, but we try to find captivating stories and try to help people, right? We want to put people first. And his story really kind of struck me, and I want to share it. I want him to share it. So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we will have our first visit of the season from a hopefully soon-to-be NFL football player. But before we get to that, let's get to the Riley Report. Here we go.
All right, we're rolling. We are going to the NFC North today, starting in Green Bay. The reports out of Green Bay are that Rory Robinson, and this is Rory Robinson of the Mirror and USA Today, is reporting that the Green Bay Packers are planning to get rid of cornerback Jair Alexander. Alexander was the Packers' first-round pick in 2018 and has been one of Green Bay's best players since then. However, after back-to-back injury-plagued seasons, the Packers are reportedly looking to cut their losses and move on from Alexander. In related news, Zach Cruz from Packers Wire has pegged Asante Samuel, also cornerback, as a potential replacement. He says Zach Cruz of Packers Wire laid out some of the pros of Green Bay signing Asante Samuel Jr. and mentions the fact that Samuel is, quote, only 25 years old, who has starting experience and production history. He's a 47-game starter at cornerback and has 6 interceptions, 37 pass breakups with at least 10 every year between 2021 and 2023. Asante Samuel also has a working history with Packers passing game coordinator Derek Ansley when they worked together in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Ansley was his position coach in 2021 and in 2022, and he was the Chargers defensive coordinator in 2023. Familiarity is so important in determining fits for players. And in draft news out of Green Bay, Brennan Rupp, also of Packers Wire, has targeted Jamari Caldwell as a potential target for Green Bay. He posted in an article, he suggests that Oregon defensive tackle Caldwell could be a player that the Packers target in the 2025 NFL draft. He states, if the Packers want to continue their upward trajectory against the run next season, a player they could target is Jamari Caldwell. Caldwell started his college career at the JUCO level before transferring to Houston in 2022. During his 2 seasons in Houston, Caldwell recorded 13 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, and he then transferred to Oregon for the 2024 season. At 6'2", 342 pounds, Caldwell is a space eater. He has the mass and powerful base to clog up running lanes. Simply put, he's a roadblock. Let's get Will's thoughts on news out of Green Bay.
Well, I guess I will say this on Jamari Caldwell. It's an interesting name. He is not highly rated. So did they say where they're looking at picking him up, where in the draft?
I should have listed that. I think it was 67.
So they're giving him a late second round draft grade right now.
Yep.
His prospect ranking, I want to say that he's probably towards the bottom, but he is a road grader. The guy is massive. He's what, 6'1", 340 pounds. But he has short arms, 32 and a quarter. He's got 9.5 inch hands, which are not terrible. 40 was 5'10". Wingspan is really short, so he's not, in my opinion, he's not a very good prospect. But that doesn't mean that he can't turn out to be a good football player. So we're going to see, as we get through the draft and as we get through the combine, that some of these lesser known commodities coming out of college are going to turn into elite options in the NFL. And even when they don't have a good first or second season, well, maybe it's that third season that they needed. So this could be a guy that turns into a gem. I would not have him at the end of the second round right now. Matter of fact, I know I don't. But he's an interesting prospect. He reminds me a little bit of Siaka Ika. Kind of similar size, status. But go ahead, take him, I guess is what I would say, because I don't think that's going to – I don't think it's going to stop us from running the football, at least right now. As far as pros and cons of signing cornerback Asante Samuel, I'm neither pro nor against this. I mean, obviously, I don't have a mule in the race for the Packers, right? But as far as his previous history, starting experience, 47 games, 6 career interceptions, 37 pass breakups. He's had 10, in each of the last 3 seasons, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, he's a good player still, but, man, he would be a good depth signing for the Lions if we really needed some depth, to be honest with you. As far as Packers set to cut 2-time Pro Bowler Jair Alexander, I've never had him as a fit to the Lions. I don't think that he will be, on the radar for Brad Holmes at all. If we were to assimilate this to the Lions, I really don't have much to say on Jair other than I guess I'm not surprised.
Beautiful. Let's head down to Chicago. Alyssa Barbieri from Bears Wire is reporting that the Bears are not expected to use their franchise tag this year. She says, the reason why, there's not an obvious candidate. The Bears' 2 biggest free agents are wide receiver Keenan Allen and guard Tevin Jenkins, but Chicago isn't expected to use the tag on either. Allen was a reliable target for Caleb Williams, but he's likely looking to get paid more than what would likely be a 1-year team-friendly deal. The team also expects Rome Odunze to step into a bigger role in year 2, and Tevin Jenkins appears on his way out of Chicago as the Bears are hesitant to commit a substantial amount of money to him due to his playing in just 45 games over the last 4 seasons. Matt Bowen of ESPN on the free agency front has dubbed the Bears as a best fit for 2 different free agents. He's got, of the top 50 free agents, which included Kansas City guard Trey Smith and Atlanta Falcons center Drew Dahlman, he's got them both linked to the Bears. Bowen points to Trey Smith's connection to the Bears GM, Ryan Poles, who was in Kansas City when Smith was drafted. And in Dahlman, the draw for Chicago would be that he has proven to be a stable and productive player, something Chicago would love for new head coach Ben Johnson and quarterback Caleb Williams. And then going back to Alyssa Barbieri on the Chicago Bears draft front, Bears shore up offensive line at number 10 overall. It's no secret that the Bears had one of the worst offensive lines in 2024, she writes. And despite that, Caleb Williams still had 20 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions on the season. With new head coach Ben Johnson having made it crystal clear that his offense will be built around Caleb Williams, it stands to reason that the Bears will likely look to protect Caleb. Jordan Plosher of Pro Football Focus has the Bears selecting Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. with the 10th overall pick in April. Will, your thoughts in Chicago?
Oh, man. Honestly, Chicago's a dumpster fire, and I don't think it's going to get any better this year. I don't care how many fire extinguishers they use. I just don't think that the fire is going to get put out just yet. They're going to be in a slight rebuild, and I hate to use the term rebuild. Maybe it's retooling is a little bit better of a term to use. As far as Jenkins on his way out, I'm not surprised. They definitely need some interior help on that offensive line. Keenan Allen, like I've always said, you cannot buy a football team. You can't overspend on free agents and then expect to keep them. I'm not surprised if he's exited this year at all. As far as 2 free agent fits for offensive linemen, yeah, I mean, they need help. So they're going to be looking wherever they can. And I do agree with your last point here. Shoring up the offensive line is probably the most important move the Bears can make this season. And finding somebody in the draft. Now I'm having trouble even remembering who I even mocked to them this year in my first 1.0, which, by the way, 2.0 will be out soon. Let me see if I can take a quick look, but I'll come back to that after you go through the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's head down to Minnesota. Now, Dan Graziano from ESPN is reporting that the Vikings are pushing back their void date for Byron Murphy Jr., their defensive back. Per a league source, the Vikings and cornerback Byron Murphy Jr. have agreed to push back the void date on his contract. Originally, the deal voided 23 days prior to the start of the league year. Now, it is the day before the start of the league year. What this means is that Murphy cannot be franchised since the date is past the deadline for teams to use the franchise tag. And then on the draft front for the Vikings, Daniel Jeremiah from NFL.com has noted simply that the Vikings have seen the difference a dynamic player at the running back position can do and can make, and references Jahmyr Gibbs out of Detroit as an example. So will Minnesota look to add a dynamic playmaker in round 1 to put behind likely starter at quarterback J.J. McCarthy? He has Travion Henderson, running back, going to Minnesota at number 24.
So on the Vikings, talking about Vikings pushing back the void date on cornerback Byron Murphy, that tells me they're trying to get a deal done. They want to keep him in-house. I think that's a good move. We'll see if they're going to be able to afford him and do the things that they want to do in free agency. Minnesota Vikings putting a running back to Minnesota in round 1 is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But you know what? I respect Daniel Jeremiah, but this is just not going to happen. There's no way that Ashton Genty or, any of the other running backs in this draft, which I believe that there's probably only 2 that could probably potentially go in the first round, but Genty is definitely one of them. I just think that would be a bad move. They need to protect JJ if he's going to be their starter this year. And an offensive line makes, way more sense for the Vikings, especially with where they're picking. In my mock, I had, by the way, I believe I had defensive line for the Chicago Bears. I had Banks gone way before that. But as far as Minnesota goes, I had them taking a tight end. So it does kind of help them, with blocking, as the extra, tight end in the game and, in 22 or 12 personnel. It's not necessarily an offensive lineman, but at picking at 24, they will have the pick of the litter. They could reach for a guard, but I think that it is going to be a little bit early. Maybe a tackle convert at pick 24 makes sense. I could see that happening, but not a running back. What's up next?
We head to the Detroit Lions, our beloved Detroit Lions. Now, Russell Brown from Lions Wire threw out a suggestion that Josh Sweat could be a fit in Detroit. He says, having defensive end Josh Sweat on this list is probably the least realistic option for the Lions. He's got a whole list of players, but he does point out that much of that is due to the price tag going through the roof after the Super Bowl. Throughout the playoffs this season, Sweat generated 10 total sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. During his 7 years in Philadelphia, Sweat has made 54 tackles for loss and 43 sacks. Over the last 3 seasons, he's generated 31 tackles for loss and 25.5 sacks. Really starting to come into his own, Sweat plays with very good burst and is able to turn speed to power. If he were to sign with Detroit, he'd pair very nicely with Aiden Hutchinson. So Darius Smith and Josh Pascal, the Lions giving themselves another weapon on the defensive line would be wise and should be a priority this offseason. Sweat's projected market value from Spotrac is 3 years for $56.5 million, which equates to $18.8 million per season. And then in our draft news, we've talked a lot about the Myles Garrett front, trades, draft, all of how they would all work together. But Jeff Risdon from Lions Wire laid out what a Myles Garrett trade would look like. And here's what he has. And again, he's specific to say this is hypothetical. It's not a projection of what the Lions will do. It's not a prediction of what they will do. The Lions would send the following to the Browns: a 2025 first-round pick, which would be number 28 overall, 2025 third-round pick, which is number 101, a 2026 first, a 2026 third, and Broderick Martin. And in exchange, the Browns would send back Myles Garrett, a 2025 fifth-round pick, which would be number 165, and a 2026 second-round pick. The fifth-round pick the Browns are sending is Detroit's own selection, which was traded in the fall for edge Darius Smith. So, that's kind of rapid fire, but your thoughts there on maybe Josh Sweat in Detroit, and again, a revisit of another hypothetical Myles Garrett trade.
So let me start with Myles Garrett. This is kind of hilarious. Number one, 2 firsts and 2 thirds. I think that is probably the barrier for entry into the Myles Garrett lottery. However, they turned down 2 first-round picks last season. And now, heading into a final contract year, I believe Myles Garrett, does he have 1 or 2 years left now? I don't remember. But the fact that Risdon thinks it's 2 firsts and 2 thirds and that we get a second and a fifth back, yeah, that doesn't work. There's no way that the Browns are going to trade Garrett for that kind of draft capital. We're not going to get anything back in a trade. But putting Broderick Martin on the trade block, I mean, what is that? I think it's hilarious because that's saying that Broderick is worth something. So somebody thinks that Broderick is actually worth something in a trade. And I'm being facetious here, right? So if Risdon is saying that Broderick Martin is worth something, then I think that we have the answer that Broderick is not a wasted pick. However, that is the same line of Hendon Hooker. They're just not worth anything when they haven't played. Right? These guys have got to progress in the NFL to be worth anything. And Brad gave up 2 fourths and a fifth for Broderick Martin. I highlighted everything in a video yesterday about Broderick Martin with all the facts. And it's hilarious that I still get feedback that people just don't get it. It's like they didn't listen or pay attention to anything that I said in the video at all. So maybe they need to rewatch it because Broderick Martin, he has yet to be who we think he's going to be, but less than 15% of all picks or all players in the NFL are third-round picks that play. So when you think about taking a guy at the back end of the third round and you give up a couple of fifths that were really meaningless because there was no other defensive end or defensive tackle unless you had the forethought of Kobe Turner being that dog that he is, that's the only one that you would have taken. But nobody would have known that. I mean, I did. I mocked Kobe to the Lions. I loved his tape. I'm surprised that Brad missed on him, but I don't think that there was another situation that was better. However, go watch the video. I think you'll learn a lot. Myles Garrett will not be a Detroit Lion in 2025, and if he does become a Lion in 2025, then that means that Brad has decided to crumble to pressure, and he's going all in. As far as Josh Sweat, yeah, this isn't happening either. So Josh Sweat obviously is going to want a max contract. Listen to Aiden Hutchinson. He's on one team at one position. It just doesn't work. You will be in a bad situation all over again. However, I think that we'll know more when we get to OTAs. Where is Hutchinson's progression going to be? We saw him running the other day in Allen Park. He still has a limp. Right? Doesn't look like he's totally healed. Doesn't look like he's extremely strong yet in the bottom half. It's just going to take time. So when we know more about Aiden, I think that's when we'll have some definitive ideas as to what's going to happen in free agency. Unfortunately, we can't get through free agency or the draft and know what's going to be going on with Aiden. So maybe Brad Holmes is going to pad the position. That might be a smart move for him, is to pad the position. So for that reason, yeah, I could see another defensive end, defensive tackle coming in through free agency. But I don't think it's going to be a $25, $30 million guy. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. That was just the two topics for the Lions. So good work on Riley Road Report. Final thoughts for you.
Yep. No, I think you're right. Man, it's hard to follow up with Will because I think you hit all the points. So I think it's going to continue to be the best division in the NFL, and we'll find out here soon what the rosters will look like. But hopefully the Lions have a great offseason and we can three-peat in that NFC North.
Okay, now that Eric is done taking his nap, what's up with John Morton? We got some news coming in about John Morton. Hands off Ben Johnson with a Jared Goff warning. Washes hands of Ben Johnson with a Jared Goff warning. That sounds like some power moves. What's happening?
Yeah. So last night I was reading an article by Fansided. And after reading this article, I now believe that Jared Goff will have a much bigger role in building the new look offense under John Morton and possibly have more control up to the line of scrimmage. So let's take a look at what Fansided had to say. And I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs verbatim here. So it says, Lions' new offensive coordinator, John Morton, washes his hands of Ben Johnson with a Jared Goff warning. Johnson had total control of Detroit's scoring unit. He virtually pushed all the buttons until the formation was lined up and the ball was ready to be snapped. Yet, based on recent comments in an interview with Dan Miller on Fox 2, Morton doesn't plan on doing things that way moving forward. Instead, the Lions will revolve everything around franchise quarterback Jared Goff and his preferences and tendencies to maximize continuity. A vastly different approach from Johnson over the past few seasons. Morton entrusts Goff to continue the vision that's made them so successful. The philosophical 180 is an effort to help the Lions maintain their identity through the Detroit Lions' new offensive coordinator. And he declared it all starts with the quarterback. So what that says to me is that he is going to give the play to Jared Goff, and then Jared Goff's going to go to the line. He's going to make the decision on what to do. And it sounds like Ben Johnson was doing what the coach out in LA was doing to him, that he was kind of controlling him. That's what this sounds like to me, is that Ben Johnson had total control right up to the line of scrimmage. And then it was up to Goff to, make the call. But now it sounds like he's just going to give him the play and it's all on Goff. So I kind of like that. That's more of the Peyton Manning style of QBing. So I don't mind that at all.
Give me 1 second, but Riley, what's your response to that?
Yeah, that's exactly what you want. The analogy I heard, and as Eric, as you're talking about that, is that McVay was like playing PlayStation and he had the controller. So Goff, you're the vessel, but I'm controlling everything. And then Goff comes here, and we've all had that. I've had bosses that micromanage and keep you under the iron thumb, and then there's others that's like, I've shown you what to do, I trust you, go make it happen. And it's a night and day difference. And you're loose, you play free. And we've seen how much that's impacted Jared Goff. So I really think that, look, they knew all season, I'm sure, that Ben Johnson this was his last year. How early do you think Dan Campbell targeted John Morton as the replacement? I bet that was pretty early in the process. And then it was just give it a couple weeks after the season and then make it official. I think that was the guy all along, because you knew you can't redo things with Jared Goff. You got to keep it just as it's been. And so this is his offense, and that's how you're going to get the best Jared Goff, which is how you're going to get the best Detroit Lions.
Yeah, so I would agree with the large majority of that too. Quite honestly, it's interesting now in retrospect when you look back at what happened during this transition of, swinging door of coaches. leaving and coming in. And I do think that Dan Campbell had identified some potential replacements. And I remember saying specifically, it's like, how come we haven't heard anything about the Lions? And are the Lions doing pre-interviews prior to these guys accepting jobs? I've said it before that, during my career, I would try to interview at least once a year just to kind of stay on my toes, right? See what's out there, where do I fit? Is there something better? Because, when you're in an executive role or an executive sales role, it just seems like there's always something better that you can do. Or maybe there's something more exciting that you would like to try. So I wonder if they do that. I wonder if they bring guys in to interview prior to any of this happening, but would that send a bad message to the guys you already have on your team? And you do it in confidence. I think you do it, behind closed doors. You don't air it out. And I think that's exactly what the Lions did. They didn't air it out. They didn't let anybody know that they were even interviewing anybody. All of a sudden it was just John Morton's the coach, he's the coordinator. And then we heard, some other guys coming in like Shaw and others, but, I think that Dan Campbell already had a list put together of who's going to replace these guys if they're available and if they're willing when we lose the amount of guys that we lost this year. I mean, I think they replaced them swiftly. Yesterday, speaking about coaches, Justin Rogers in the thread updated our coaching tree, if you will, and I'm going to try to pull that up, but I asked him a question yesterday because it was a question that I brought up during the show. And it was, hey, how many assistants did we add? Did we add more than we had last year? And his message was, yes, maybe one or two more assistants that the Lions added this season. So I guess I was spot on yesterday in thinking that we are a little bit deeper, in our coaching tree now, and that maybe we're adding, and getting a little bit heavy, assuming we're going to have more poaching and more moves after this next season. So if I see the brilliance in Dan Campbell, then I would assume that he is going to convince Sheila to overspend, bring some extra guys in. It can never hurt to have too many coaches. You can always find something for them to do and be ready, because every year this is what it's going to look like now. We're going to be losing guys year over year. So, let me get into my sheet here. I just closed it.
Well, I know there's one position that they did not fill, that they should have filled on their assistant coaching staff, and that's the position for me at training camp to shag kicks for Jake Bates, because they had no one back there doing it, and he needs somebody to do that so he doesn't have to do it himself. He was climbing over equipment and stuff to get his own balls that he had kicked through the field goal. So I believe that's a danger to Jake Bates, and we don't want him getting hurt doing that stuff. So if you're listening to Detroit Lions, I'm ready for my job as an assistant ball shagger.
Ball shagger. Yep. You definitely are a ball shagger. I'll go ahead and I'll give him a call today. We'll see if we can make that happen.
Yeah.
All right. So let me see if I can find this one on the coaching staff by Justin here. All right, so here's the updated list. Obviously, head coach Dan Campbell, John Morton, OC, Scotty Montgomery is the assistant head coach, wide receivers coach, Hank Fraley, run game coordinator, offensive line, David Shaw, passing game coordinator, Mark Brunell stays with quarterbacks coach, Tashard Choice, great choice at running backs, Tyler Roll, tight ends, Seth Ryan sticking around as assistant tight end, Steve Oliver, assistant offensive line, Bruce Gradikowski, offensive assistant, Justin Mesa, offensive quality control, and Marquez Tui Sosopo is offensive assistant. Defensive staff, Kelvin Shepard is the defensive coordinator. Deshea Townsend sticks around as the passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach. Casey Rogers, run game coordinator, defensive line. I am so much more intrigued by Casey Rogers day after day after day. Having that Todd Bowles style of defense now in Detroit, I think is going to be it's going to be fun. Jim O'Neill, defensive assistant and safeties. Sean Dion Hamilton, linebackers. David Carew, senior defensive assistant, outside linebackers. August Mangin, defensive assistant. Caleb Collins, defensive assistant. Dre Thompson is the William Clade Ford Minority Coaching Assistant Defensive Quality Control. On special teams, we still have Dave Phipp and Jet Modkins. No change there. Sports performance, I don't see any changes here, but it's Mike Clark, Jill Costanza, Josh Schuler, Corey Smith. And then we have some support staff by Jesse Giambra as the Chief of Staff Head Coach Administration. Returning coaches to new roles. So Montgomery retains his assistant head coaching title while moving from running backs coach to wide receivers. Meanwhile, after 4 years of assisting with wide receivers, Seth Ryan will also serve now as an assistant tight ends coach in 2025. Hank Fraley, who received offensive coordinator looks around the league, returns with an added title of run game coordinator. Defensively, obviously, Shepard gets bumped to DC, and Deion Hamilton is taking over the linebacker room after serving as Shepard's assistant the past 2 seasons. So, interesting article if you want to take a look at it by Justin here, Justin Rogers. It's on the Detroit Football Network where you can find all of his work. Justin is, and I'm not going to just say that he's this, but he is. He's probably my favorite writer right now for the Lions. He does a really good job. He is so open and transparent about what he does. There's nothing in there but, when you read his information, there's nothing in there but factual statistical data. And you don't see a narrative, right? You just see him giving you what you need. And that's what I really enjoy about really good writers, is they don't give you a bunch of fluff. All right, we are already up at the 9:30 hour here. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to transition to Kelvin Shepard and how this defense is supposed to play together this season, where I was vindicated again with this interview yesterday that came out with Kelvin Shepard and Fox 2's Dan Miller. So you guys are going to hear something at the end of this video that is the exact thing that we have been talking about for well over a year now. I was so elated this morning when I listened to it. I had to go tell Megan, who was actually up, that I can't believe that Kelvin just said what he said. It feels good. I'm not an NFL coach. I'm not the breed of an NFL coach. But to know that, you know, we have similarities in a thought process without ever having a conversation with the man, without him ever saying this before. Aaron Glenn never really said it before. I mean, he kind of alluded to it last year where he said that, you know, sacks don't matter, but pressures do. You know, he was kind of saying that sacks are not the big deal for us, but obviously getting pressure matters the most. Now it's transitioning into, in my opinion, a more evolved defense with Kelvin Shepard. So let's take a listen to it now. Kelvin Shepard and Dan Miller. I hope that this plays fine. If you guys have any issues, just let me know, but it should be good to go. Here we go.
Played out. How did you kind of just play that thing and watch this thing work?
Yeah, I mean, you say what you want, but you can't hide the fact that we all knew there was going to be change.
I will say this. So the audio issues that you will hear, at least for me, because I only have one earbud in right now, it is the way that they recorded this. So it is in, must be 5.1 or 7.1 stereo mode, because Dan Miller's on the left, Kelvin Shepard is on the right. So let's mute it up and let's take a listen to what these guys have to say. I'll start it over here.
Process played out. How did you kind of just play that thing and watch this thing work?
Yeah, I mean, you say what you want, but you can't hide the fact that we all knew there was going to be change, whether good or bad, once this season ended. By way of success for us, thankfully, we saw change due to success. And we saw it coming going towards the end of the year. You hear people talking, people start calling your phone, agents start to talk. Who's going to be on your staff? And I'm like, what staff? I'm on AG staff. Like, what do you, I don't know. This is what I know, and I know the game we have this week.
So I'm going to pause it here. I mean, this was a great statement. You know, Kelvin Shepard was not lost in the sauce of off-season moves. He was in the moment. He was, this is our game. This is what's up next. I'm not worried about all this outside noise. I can't say the same for Ben Johnson.
You try to have that tunnel vision, but in our profession, it's hard because there are things down the road that you have to kind of quote unquote start to prepare and plan for. And that's a unique thing about this place and why I love it here so much, the transparency and the openness and the dialogue. There's never any looking over your shoulder moments. So guys were kind of prepared while in the same time we all understood the task at hand, but there were still things that were happening that were out of our control, so to say.
So you are down the road now, and you are the defensive coordinator. So what does that mean to be the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions for Dan Campbell, a man who has had your back since day one?
It means everything to me. It's the reason I chose to stay here over other opportunities. It would have been almost impossible to take another job, no matter what. And I told him that day, because he said, "Now, Shep, you know, kind of looking ahead, that day's about to come to where I'm not going to be able to keep you." I said, "Well, maybe by that time there'll be a system to where we can have 2 head coaches and I'll be your head coach B here." Because, man, I mean, I owe a lot to Dan. Number one, the belief system he's had in me since day one when I met him in 2014 as a player. And then that's now carried over into the coaching career. He's one of the first people that told me I should take a shot at this thing. He saw it in me as a player. And you can say what you want, but the belief system, and other people try to say, I don't care what people think about me. That's not true. That's not human nature. You are going to care what people think about you. Why do you want to be good or great at anything? It's because you're judged amongst your peers. Well, judged amongst your peers mean you care about what others think. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't care about your performance. You wouldn't care, so it does mean a lot. And, you know, I'm confident in myself. I'm confident in my abilities. But having a man of his stature stand in front and behind me and say, "You got this, you can do it." My first job here I was offered was to be the outside linebackers coach. And he was the first one. He said, "It would have been easy for me to make you Mark DeLeon's assistant. You played linebacker, that's comfortable. But to truly grow as a person, not just in this profession, you have to step outside of that comfort zone." And it's something he first told me getting into it. He said, "I want to put you with the outside linebackers. And those are really DNs." And at first, it was like a nervous shock. It was like, yeah, I want the job. And I'd love to have my own room, but I'm about to step in the room and coach a guy like Romeo Aquar, who I played with for 3 years. I'm going to step in the room and coach Trey Flowers, who's on a $100 million deal. I got to make sure I tell him the right things. And so after I got through that initial shock to my system, I dig right in. And it's always been about the support system he's kind of placed around me. No different now. But year one, I had Dom Capers sitting in my room every day. I mean, how
experience
you
there.
know what I mean? That's why I tell people I did not get here alone. Yeah, it took a lot of man hours and things that I had to go out and do, but you know, I'd be kidding you and doing a disservice not to give back credit to the guys who've paved this thing for me, starting with Dan. And Dom Capers was exceptional, showing me everything he told me. Don't just be boxed in. Look at this. I want to show you how I built 2 franchises, 2 startups, 2 expansions. And just having guys willing to pour into me, it's the reason I go about my business the way I do and make sure I'm pouring into others, because I know that was done for me.
This is huge. It's impactful. When you sit back and listen to, every coach that I feel that we have had on this team has pretty much all said the same thing. And it starts with Dan. You know, Dan recognized who I was and who I wasn't. And for Kelvin, it was being comfortable at being uncomfortable. Because like he just said, it would have been easy to put Kelvin Shepard as Dom Capers, said he's a Dom Capers assistant. But Dan had a bigger vision. He believed in Kelvin Shepard, and he wanted Kelvin to go be uncomfortable coaching his own room in the outside linebacker room. And that is what really started Shepard's transformation as a coach. And man, is he really transformed. So you've got to give all the credit here to Dan Campbell. And then, of course, Aaron Glenn, too. That was another profound statement by Kelvin Shepard where he said, you know, these guys are pouring into me and standing behind me, in front of me, and not taking all the glory, not being the guy up front that you could be, because you are the DC. You can stand in front of me and you can take all the credit for everything. But he didn't do that. Aaron Glenn wanted these guys to get some recognition. He wanted them in front of the team. He wanted them in front of, the fans and in the podium, talking to us and us getting an opportunity to recognize the brilliance of who they are. So It's such a good interview. We'll keep rolling here.
One thing that would seem to make this a natural fit would be that AG seemed to encourage you to get involved with all the position groups. These guys, not just your position group, this entire defense, they know your voice. They know the way that you want things done. There won't be any surprises.
Absolutely. I'm deeply indebted to Aaron Glenn. Deeply. Because, yeah, Dan was pushing for me. He wanted me on the staff. But it was AG who had to say, okay, yeah. So I remember the day I flew here. It's crazy. It's the office that I have now. That's what my son goes, so do you have AG's office? I'm like, that's what you worried about? The office with the couch? Come on, man. Like, but I remember sitting in there back in 2021, flying here in February, or that might have been late January of 2021, sitting with AG. I never met him. Obviously, I knew of him.
Sure.
Hall of Fame career and all that. And I've heard about him as a coach, and everybody loved being around him. But I had no knowledge, no prior relationships or anything like that with AG. And sitting in there with him, I think it was 4 or 5 hours. I mean, we just jailed from the start. From talking life, talking ball, similar upbringings, things like that. And he said after that 4 hour shift, he said, you didn't know this, but I left the room and said, Dan, I don't care what he's coaching, he's going to be on my staff. And that belief system, him allowing me to stand out front. A lot of people, you have to be very comfortable in your own skin to do some of the things AG allowed, not only me, but his staff to do. Have more meeting time. It's the little things that people don't see outside of the optics. Having more meeting time with your players. When I play, you get limited time with your position coach because the coordinator wants to say everything, do everything. But him pushing people up front and not making it about him allowed me to grow as an individual and as a coach. And, you know, I'm forever indebted to him. Like, I really am.
Biggest adjustment now that you're running the show, you're calling the defense, biggest change for you?
Not trying to put everything around the linebackers and not make the linebackers the priority in everything I do. It's one of the first things Dan said. It's kind of funny. He's like, I might not even give you any linebackers to look at because I know you're going to spend all your time. So just having that, and everybody from Solomon in the media, just having that open mindset, the more bigger landscape picture, the bigger picture. It's not just about my 3 or 4 guys on the field. It's about how does this now impact Aleem McNeil? How does this impact a guy like Terrion Arnold? How does this impact Kirby Joseph? Every time I'm thinking about something now, it now has to encompass all 11. So that's something I've expanded my mind to. And just having, again, my support system, though. A guy like Casey Rogers walking in the door, like, if Shep's the guy, I'm coming. Like, whoa. Like, that's how he felt about me. Now, he seen me as a player down in Miami in 2014, but from the coaching realm, he didn't know really. And just having the belief in him, he's called defenses before for Ty Bowles. So having that experience, that knowledge, Deshae Townsend up for multiple jobs this year as far as a coordinator, having him back and excited, Jim O'Neil being a coordinator in this league for 3 years, and who, might I add, had opportunities elsewhere, sticking around and sticking with me. Like, that's the type of stuff I work for, is guys who's willing to pour into me. I got to make sure that I fill their cup as well.
All right, so let me take you out.
Again, I mean, it's just the culture. You know, I get really bent on people talking smack about Brad Holmes and the culture and the identity. This is why, everybody. This is the reason why Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell set out to build a culture. It wasn't just the players, but it had to start up top. It started with Sheila. It trickled all the way down, you know, through Brad and Dan, and then it filters from there like little fingers to all of these assistants, the coordinators, and everybody on the team down to the team. And then it works its way back up. And as you're hearing from Kelvin Shepard right now, the type of respect that he has garnered from the assistants that he has around him, you could kind of tell that he didn't expect it, but it's exactly why he has done this type of work and why he has put so much time into not just accepting, but giving. You know, like he said, pouring into others' cups and making sure he keeps them full. Not of just opportunity, but recognition, right? And giving them an opportunity to be who they are. This is why I know that the moves Brad makes with intent, and the moves that he doesn't make with intent are the right moves for this team. And this is just another example of it. We'll keep rolling here.
Outside the linebackers and push you up front.
Yep.
Biggest thing you can get is a healthy Aiden Hutchinson and a healthy Ali McNeil.
No doubt.
That's good right there. But it did seem, for part of this season, you had trouble generating pressure. You had to generate it. You had to manufacture it at times.
Yep.
You got some injuries coming back there. You got some contract situations there. How important is it that you get that group up front right on this defense?
Everything you do on defense starts with the front. Just look at the final guys in the championship game. And everybody knows, this is not I'm telling somebody some secret.
That Philly thing caught your eye, didn't it?
Everything you do on defense starts with the front, and it does. It starts with the trenches. In both the run and pass game, everybody is so pass happy nowadays.
Sound familiar?
But if you really watch these games, it's a lot of people going back to the roots of football, and that's toughness in the trenches, and you better have that. It starts there. I always say you have to earn the right to rush the passer. It doesn't matter if you could get off the ball and be this glorified DPR pass rushing type player if you don't earn the right to get to those pass downs. So just making sure we find that fine balance in guys that could play the run and pass, and just making sure they gel with who we want to be, because that supersedes everything. You can have the most talented guy, but if Brad, Dan, if they don't see them as a fit for who we believe we want to wear this uniform, then we'll pass on those guys. We've seen it happen now for 4 years I've been here. I'm like, whew, we sure?
Yeah.
And you look up a year from that decision being made, where myself or, guys who don't do the deep dive studies like our front office, and you're like, oh, they were right. And
I have a feeling I'm just going to hear a lot of crickets from some other people around this YouTube universe. It's amazing that he just said, yeah, he loves some players too. Now I'm going to paraphrase what he was trying to tell us. Is he loved a lot of these players coming out of the draft. But then, he said it himself. He's like, whoa, like, you mean like we're really going to pass on this dude? Yeah, we did. We just did. And then you go back and look a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. That's why. Because maybe that individual didn't work out. Some will, some don't, most don't. So I think that when, again, take what Kelvin Shepard is telling you as truth. It is the gospel of what this team is about. And in what Brad and Dan are doing, he gets it. He understands it. The team that we have now of coaches sticking around, and the team that has come in from other teams, the Mortons, the Shaws, and everybody else, there's a reason why they flock to Detroit, because they're doing things the right way. Brad is hit on so many draft picks, it's not even funny. But let's keep rolling. We're almost done here. Got about 4 minutes.
And Brad's going to be right more than he is wrong. So I always trust
straight.
Whatever players they give me, we're going to coach them all the same.
They say it. Not everybody can play for the Lions.
And that's real. A fact. Not everybody can work for the Lions, Dan. Not all media guys can do what you do. I believe that. It takes special people. It's about the people here. And that's something I appreciate. It's not just, I told you, Shard, that's one of my best friends, T-Choice.
I know.
I told him, I said, just wait, bro. I said, it's the best working environment I've ever been in my life. Like, ever. Playing or coaching is the best working environment.
You know this defense. You know the players on it. Are there any young guys that you look at and you say,
here comes the vindication.
This guy's ready to take a jump? I think last year we said that about Jack, and he did.
Absolutely.
So anybody you're looking at and you're saying, you know what, this guy's ready to make a leap. People better keep their eye on him.
Oh, it's various. I mean, we have a young nucleus, a young core. But somebody jumps out at me, a Terrion Arnold.
Yeah.
There's so much meat on that bone that he don't even know. He called me a couple days ago playing around. I said, where you at? Down in Florida. I was like, you better enjoy it, because when you get back the next time you see me, we getting to work, brother. And he's like, oh, absolutely, coach. I know how you roll. But just TA, the Enos Rakestraws of the world, the Makai Wingos, you go through it. You even talk to Brian Branches of the world. Everybody's like, Brian Branch. Brian Branch is only going into his third year. That's a young player. I know we see this dynamic athlete, but there's so much meat on the bone from the neck up with that player. Kirby continuing to grow, where he took a step, major leap from the neck up. A lot of these players, you guys get to see their talent on Sundays, but we get the deep dives throughout the week to see where this player that you might think Kirby all pro, every stats, he can grow.
Yeah.
And showing the player and showing them where. That's the big thing. I try to tell my staff now, I'm big on telling people why. Why are you asking me? And it's not disrespectful if a player ever asks, why, coach? He's not challenging me. He wants understanding. And it's our job, I think, if we create a bigger understanding in what we're trying to get done, you'll see a natural progression and a natural growth with multiple guys on this roster.
All right, I'm going to pause it here because this is something that I speak to often. When I say that when you get into the NFL, when you're drafted to a team, where you got there for a few reasons. You've shown your athletic ability on the field is the most important. And that is why you get drafted above all else, is your athletic ability. But it's the guys that have the mental aptitude to be able to take this game further. So I'll ask you both, how many times have I said over the last year that you've been listening, I know, Riley, it's not been as long for you, maybe 6 months, when I say that these players are now transitioning to a different time of their, or a different part of their career where it is more mental than physical. This is now 90% mental, 10% physical, because they have the physical gifts. It's now taking it up a few notches and growing, like he says, from the neck up. I've done this before, right? I've trained guys, taught guys, not just in sports, but executive boardrooms, where I'm teaching young pups how to become some of the most elite salespeople in the world. It all relates. You might have all the physical gifts and physical tools in your tool belt, in your work bag, in your briefcase, whatever it is. But if you don't have the mental aptitude to be able to take what you're learning and apply it to your position, you are going to be stuck in the mud. Kelvin just said it best. These guys have so much more to grow, and we're seeing it grow. We see these guys and their ability. So I'm going to ask you, how many times have you heard me say it's now mental for these guys? Eric, I'll start with you. And then I'd like to get your thoughts so far in this interview.
Yeah, thousands of times. These kids, there's a reason that Brad and Dan draft grit guys, the guys with the it factor. Like they say, not everybody can play for Detroit. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean they have to run a 4-3 or a 4-2 or what does that mean? It means they have to have it up here more than they have it anywhere else. So they can take somebody that maybe doesn't have the best measurables, but the guy's super smart and has really good instincts. They're going to take him before they take some kid that you maybe really wanted. And that's what Kelvin was talking about, that, he's got to trust Brad and Dan to take the right guys, and whoever they take, that's who he's going to work with and make things happen.
I mean, you just said it best, man. I mean, taking what you have upstairs and being able to apply it, but maybe you don't have the best measurables. Maybe you're a little bit short in the arms, or maybe you're a little bit slow on the 40, or maybe your 3-cone isn't the best. Maybe your hands are just a little bit too small. But when you combine the 5 measurables and the 5 agility scores and you put it all together, yeah, the RAS score, throw it out the window, because it's not always about the RAS score. You'll see some players that are gifted, like Jack Campbell, that was a 999 or whatever in the RAS score, but he also has the mental aptitude to play the game at a much higher level. Yeah, those are elite players. They check every box, right? Those are your 90s and up on Madden if you play Madden. But maybe it's the guy that starts off as a 70, but his mental aptitude is 100. He's probably going to end up somewhere at an 80, 85. He's not going to be elite, but he's probably going to be a damn good starter at some point, or when he needs to start, but he's going to be a high-level backup and rotational player. That's our depth. And when you build a squad, you're building the trenches first, you're building your depth, because you could always go out and find an elite football player and sink a bunch of money or draft picks into it to bring that player to your team. But finding, the 90, right? That's what this game is all about. The 90 and then the 10. The 90 is your depth. Right? That's 90% of your team is depth and rotation. The 10%, those are the game changers. So, Riley, what did you think to this moment here?
You know, I can't. Well, to answer your question, how many times have I heard you say? I heard you say just the other day. You know, all these guys can physically play, but it's what's upstairs between the ears that separates them at this level. I can't help but think about Hard Knocks. When Malcolm Rodriguez was a rookie, I remember it, and they're in the film room, and Shep's turning to every linebacker in the room, and he's like, "Guys, this guy's a rookie. He's forcing me to play him." Right? You guys remember that? He said he's making plays. He's not. Maybe he wasn't the fastest or the strongest or the tallest or the widest wingspan, whatever it was, but based on what the play was and what the film was showing, like, he's in the right places at the right times. He's forcing me to play him. I don't care that he was a 6th round pick. And my good friend and coworker Bobby and I were talking about it the other day. We sell RVs, and we're talking about you know, there's technicians that know a hell of a lot more than we do about RVs, but they don't necessarily want to talk to customers. They don't want to talk to people. So you have to try to find the balance. You have to find somebody that it doesn't matter how much you know if you can't speak to somebody. And it kind of, you know, goes both ways in football. You've got to be strong. You got to run fast. You got to hit hard. You got to do all those things. But it's what's, you know, what your thought process is. That's what separates you. Will, you talk about it all the time. And yeah, you're vindicated in everything.
Well, we're not fully vindicated. We're about to be. But I will say this, that's another diamond right there, both by you and Eric. But like you just said, you may have all of the intelligence in the world about RVs. You may know every spec down to the type of nut thread is on that sheet panel, right? Or the knob that is on the toilet. You know everything. But if you can't open your mouth and convey anything to a customer that is even relatable, what does it matter what you know? It doesn't. So you may have all the tools in the world, right? The gifts of the highest RAS score, the elite measurables, and you know, your agility is out of control. But if you don't have it up here to be able to adopt a playbook, communicate with your teammates, and put yourself in a position to win, you're no good. You see it happen all the time. Some of the most gifted athletes in the world don't pan out. But some of those blue collar, lunch pail toting guys that maybe hover in the middle of athleticism end up being some of the best football players to ever play the game. And matter of fact, that is even highlighted in my measurables, in the draft work that I do and the roulette. There's some guys in here, they're like, how? How did they make it? It's because of what's up here. And it's also what's in your heart. You got to have both. You mentioned Malcolm. That is such a great analogy. I forgot all about that. Kelvin Shepard ripping that room apart and saying, look, you got a rookie. Was he a 5th round 188, right? Drafted 188th in the draft. And he was starting in year 1. It wasn't just because we needed ball players, because we didn't have a whole lot on the team. All of those draft picks were going to play, you know, a large amount of snaps the first couple of drafts. But this guy was beating everybody else out because he knew where to be, when to be there, how to get there, what to do when he got there. And that is something else that I've said, right? You can have the fastest 40 in the world. You can be the fastest lateral guy in the world, sideline to sideline, right? End zone to end zone. And let's just say you're a corner. But if you don't know where to be and when to be there, you're just going to run yourself a whole lot faster out of the play, right? But maybe you're not a 4-3 guy, and instead you're a 4-5. But you know everything. You know the playbook. You know the scheme. You study the opponent tape, and you know what their tendencies are. Well, you may not run a 4-3 or a 4-4 and run yourself out of the play, which we see all the time. It's called a missed tackle. But maybe you get there right at the right moment to make that play. What is Brian Branch's 40? Matter of fact, I don't think that it is crazy good. He might be a good analogy here. Brian Branch ran, a 4.58. A 4.58. That is slow when it comes to corners and safeties. Why is he so successful? Because he knows where to be and when to be there and how to do football things at that moment. That's why. So take the RAS score and flush it down the toilet. It means nothing. Take the Wonderlic score. That actually means something to a degree. But combining both of them, and they don't use the Wonderlic anymore, but combining the both of them together will help you find, when you do a deep dive on a player, who this player truly is. So, all right, let's finish the last 90 seconds up. This is where the real vindication comes. And I would love to know in the chat, when you hear it, what am I talking about? Like, what vindication am I talking about? Because I'll give you a hint. It goes bzzz. Here we go.
Final thing. Defensive coordinator. I know you've probably driven down the road and thought about that. What does a Kelvin Shepard defense look like? What do fans expect to see?
A team that plays together and for one another. That's number one. There's no me. There's no I in this. And I seriously mean that. That's not coach speak. That's not me. It's exactly the message that they're going to hear. I coach for my coaches. Like, we are in this together. No voice is bigger than the other. No role is bigger than the other. This is one unit and one sound. We're going to move as one with everything we do. That's number one. So that togetherness. And so many things trickle from there. Absolutely relentless effort, non-negotiable. That's things I say that the coaches aren't coaching effort. You'll stand out if your effort lacks on this defense. And then just nasty, tenacious, finishing, scratching, clawing, fighting for every blade of grass that's out there. And I think if we're able to do those things, everything else, you notice I didn't say one stat, I didn't say one accolade. Because if you do all those things and you focus on those things, then the bigger picture things will come from that. But that, to me, will be the DNA of who we are.
Well, there it is. You got to be one on a football team. You have to play together. You have to be selfless to gain more. Selfish players want accolades and stats. Selfish people want to know that they're better than other people, and they say it all the time. I'm the best. I was the first to do that. And yeah, I'll highlight things that I say. That's not about me trying to be selfish or narcissistic. It's pointing out that we get a few things right here more than we get wrong. And the reason why I'm bringing up this last statement by Kelvin Shepard, which to me is the biggest vindication of what I've been talking about for a defense for a long time. He said, I didn't mention one stat, not one accolade. And that's because when you play with what? Did you guys put it in the chat? A hive defense. Hive defense. To me, that is all these worker bees in a hive working together for one common goal. Protect the hive, protect the queen, feed, right? They go out and gather the pollen and everything to feed, to make, their little, what are they called? Nymphs or something? I don't know, whatever, bee larvae. The goal is to work together. And then when something happens and you have to react, you react together. So that's more hats on the football. That's everybody working in unison. You have to do what is called a hive defense. Nobody is above anybody else. And when you do that, and when you are able to commit to that, the stats, the individual accolades, they come. They come naturally. Just like how I say on a front four defense, like we just saw with the Eagles. No blitzing. The reason why it worked is because they worked together. And independently, they did their job. And when they did their job, the rest of the defense could do their job. It's just it's a chain link effect, right? I mean, the links just started to assemble as one person won their one-on-one. The next person next to them started winning their one-on-one, and down the line it goes. Kelvin Shepard, I appreciate you, man. I thank you so much for what you said in this interview, because it makes me feel a lot better that, the dribble that I put out there is actually good info and good content. More people will find it eventually. And more people will find it when you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. and then share this good information with other Lions fans, but more importantly, football people. Share it with someone that's not a Lions fan. We're all about the community. We're all about having, other teams, fans in our chats during game week. We're not going to turn anybody away. Doors wide open. So, Eric, let's start with you, man. Wrap up this Kelvin Shepard interview. What do you got to say about what you just learned?
I just wish that Dan Campbell would have asked 2 questions. Are you going to be stubborn and blitz like Aaron Glenn did, or are you going to do this the Kelvin Shepard way? And then, did he cut his hair off? I could not tell. It looked like he didn't have the big dreads sticking out the back during that interview. So I would have liked to have known those 2 things. I think he kind of answered it with the whole, Hive defense, everybody doing their job, but it didn't necessarily say whether he's going to be less blitz heavy. And I know it worked really well in some games, like the Minnesota game that worked to perfection, but in the Washington game, that was not so great.
Well, I guess to comment on that, the reason why it works so well in Minnesota is because, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Quarterback, Sam Darnold. Yeah, yep. He's not a dual threat, right? He's not an extremely mobile quarterback. That's why it worked. You cannot do that same defensive style against a quarterback that can run, that can fling it on the run, that can hurt you with his legs. It doesn't work. It never has. It never will. And sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you have a game that works in your favor by doing something so stupid that it actually works. But it was being prepared in a game where you want to do the exact opposite of what somebody's expecting. And following the trends and the patterns that we talked about that week, if they would have just followed the trends and the patterns, then they would have done what the Eagles did not once but twice in the playoffs, which is not blitz. So as far as the dreads, go ahead, Riley, answer the same question. Wrap up the Kelvin Shepard interview. What did you learn? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's great, man. How nice is it that you like I feel like if you were the defensive coordinator, Will, those would have all been your answers as well, right? When it falls in line with your favorite football team happens to philosophically agree with how you feel like things should be, it makes sense and it makes it more enjoyable. And it seems like Kelvin Shepard was all along going to be the defensive coordinator replacement for Aaron Glenn. And I think that Dan Miller, I know there were a couple questions that Eric highlighted that he didn't ask that he would have liked him to, but I thought the questions were very well thought out. I thought he asked good questions. So I wanted to tip the hat to Dan Miller too for a good interview on that front. And I'm excited, man. It's tough to lose a Ben Johnson and an Aaron Glenn, but I feel like Aaron Glenn at least, Kelvin Shepard, for what we've heard from this, I'm optimistic. I feel good about him. I feel like that's as good as you could get. So we'll see how it translates to the field. But I thought it was a very good interview. And if you've been watching this show, you're hearing the same things from Kelvin Shepard that you've been hearing from Will.
Well, it's not just me. It takes a team, right? Just like Kelvin Shepard says, it takes everybody around you. I didn't learn the things that I learned on my own, right? I had people teach me from day one. I've never gotten to the places that I've been in life because of just my hard work or my dedication. I've had plenty of failures in my life, and it's each one of those failures that I learned something different from it. And that's part of the mental aptitude. The same thing applies to these NFL football players is when you fail, you need to fail to succeed. And when you fail harder, because the more you fail, the more you learn, but just don't do it during the regular season, right? You got to do it in training camp. That's where you need to fail. Look, Kelvin, no, he didn't cut off his dreads. I noticed that he still had them. They're just kind of tucked behind his hat. So Kelvin's not going to change who he is, right? I mean, we expected that. He's going to continue to be who he is. So, man, impactful stuff. I really wanted to get into the Brad Holmes one. Last night I was going to jump on, but just day got away from me. So maybe we'll do it tonight, and we'll get into the Brad Holmes interview and talk about that one, because there's a lot of nuggets in that one too. But again, tomorrow morning at the 9 o'clock hour, we are going to have Darius Juju Williams on the show. He will be joining us and talking about his next step in his football career, entering the NFL draft, and talk about his past, because it's his story that to me really hit home. And there's a lot of what we don't know about these players. And thankfully, I was able to find some information about him that he had shared with others. And I'll be sending him over the list of questions here once we get off the show. And it'll be a good interview. I've set it for 30 minutes. We'll see if we go over. I know the questions that I asked could probably take us over, but thankfully he's given us some time. And there's also some other football players on that team that I'm interested in. But I'm not going to make the interview about them. I am going to ask him one question that I think is part of, I guess, just part of life, right? And maybe that, you know, we're better when we try to raise people up with us, right? When we try to elevate those around us. Matter of fact, now that I'm saying that, when I'm writing these questions yesterday and then hearing what Kelvin Shepard just said, it's the same thing.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. You know, it's like, let's talk about somebody else, not ourselves all the time, right? You don't hear that really with us a whole lot. It's we are more in tune with what's going on around us and how we can help others and try to put others first and work together as a community. The team works well. And, you know, I can't thank you guys enough for how you help me. I mean, each and every day now we're all putting in work. This is not just the Will Rock show. Like Eric and Riley both, for the last couple of weeks since we've made a change into how we do things, are putting in considerable amount of time to try to make this show better. And I feel like we are gravitating. Have much time left. We have, let's see, the new league year starts when? I don't remember. When's the new league year start?
It's coming
March
up
4th or 5th, I think.
Of March, right?
Yeah.
Not April.
Yeah, and then they can do free agency starts the 12th or the 13th. They got that funky, weird tampering period.
I see
Yeah, that's for free agency. I'm talking about the league year.
I see a comment, Will, I want to bring to your
Sure, go ahead.
attention. J-Rod says, and if I understand this right, he says, please, somehow I miss your evening shows. Give out a few moments. I think he's meaning put out a notification, which I'm sure it does. But if you do go live tonight, just keep an eye out. If you guys have not subscribed, and hit that little bell so that it does notify you when a show goes live. Correct me if I'm wrong, J-Rod, but that's what I interpreted.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. You got to turn notifications on. And just to give you a clue, the notifications only go out 3 times a day. So YouTube limits how many times, you know, we can spam you with you know, a video or something. So you'll only get 3 notifications. Matter of fact, when I look at my stats, we have almost 18% of people with notifications turned on, and that's huge. That's a big number. Let's keep on keeping on. So turn on the notification bell, then you'll get notified when there is a new show coming up. What I do in the morning is I don't release my thumbnail usually until 30 minutes to an hour before the show. I'm going to start backfilling so we have a lot of them, you know, ready to go. But sometimes live shows at night are just instant. Like they're just live breaking news. So you really won't get a notification. And sometimes I turn off notifications because it just depends on when I'm releasing content. But anyway, good show today. Riley, we'll start with you. What's your wrap up of the day? What did we learn?
Just I don't know, man. I don't mean to be sentimental, but I love this show. I love this foundation that you've started. I love being here with you and with Eric. You guys bring a lot of knowledge to the table. I've learned so much about football since I interviewed Will for Talkin' Football podcast on October 19th, and I feel like I've learned so much about football since then, and echo his sentiments about everybody being here in the chat. And man, it's the off season, right? This is usually the time where I'm just missing the hell out of football, and I am. But because of this show and everything that we have going and building here, I still feel very connected to the Lions, and I'm excited for this off season, and I'm excited for tomorrow morning with Darius Juju Williams.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what he has to say. And by the way, so he's the reason why. The other reason why I came across him was I came across one of his hit highlights, and it was just like Jadeveon Clowney's on U of M, and it was a crazy hit. This guy's got all the freakish ability in the world. I can't wait to hear more, but I'm also highlighting HBCU school. So the HBCU Combine was just yesterday, I believe, or the day before. And there's going to be the Legacy Bowl, I believe, on Saturday. I may or may not be live for it. I've never watched it. This is the first year that I've even really paid attention to the HBCU Combine. And I made some notes of some of the players that were in that, some of the players that really had a good day. Man, there's some gifted athletes, and I'm interested to see where some of them land. I've got one thing that I want to say before I get Eric's wrap up of the day. Now, I didn't know this to the degree that it states, but when we talk about Brad Holmes maybe making a mistake with the roster and not doing X, Y, and Z before the divisional round by addressing, let's say, defensive end. According to the NFL, on January 8th, beginning at 4 p.m. New York time, on the Wednesday following the final regular season weekend, rosters are frozen for clubs that are participating in the postseason with limited exceptions. Brad couldn't do anything more. You could probably grab some guys from your practice squad and move them around. Obviously, you can do that. You might be able to grab somebody off the couch. But when a team, like we were talking about Calais Campbell for a moment, if the Dolphins would have released him, he wouldn't have been able to play. So he would have just been on your roster for the next year, is the way I'm understanding. He had to have been released before January 8th. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So January 7th is when, is the last day that you can make a move. So let's take some heat off of Brad because, again, I'm going to try to find the facts, the stats, the analytics, all that stuff to try to make sense of things from a truth, honest, transparent narrative, nothing else. Eric, what did we learn today?
I learned that the first day of the 2025 league year ends at midnight New York time on March 12th. So March 12th is the official first day of the league year.
All right. So there we go. That means that we have just under, about 3 weeks here?
Yep.
That we need to get this channel to 10,000. And that was our goal for this year. I do not want to finish short. If we do, we do, but I don't want to. It's a goal that I kind of reset because this year's goal was only 5,000. That's it. So we're well above the goal, but let's hit that next milestone. And then we can work on the other channels that will be coming pretty soon. So the interesting part about the rest of what we have going on between, now and next week, Thursday.
Yep.
I mean, we just don't have a whole lot of time here between now and the combine.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I am going to try to make it. I really don't want to miss it, but I have to get 2 injections. So they're going to inject the back of my head on Friday to try to help with the dizziness. I have no idea what's going to happen with that. And then on that next Monday, they have to do some other injections. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to go or not. I definitely have to make Thursday. Like, that's the biggest goal is Thursday because that's defensive line. So to me, that's the number one goal is at least go see the defensive line because I feel like that's where we're going to be spending some time. So anyway, we'll see you guys back here tomorrow morning. Darius Juju Williams will be with us tomorrow morning, probably right around 9 a.m. We might have to take a quick break during that time so that we can get things set up but I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all back here tomorrow. You guys have a wonderful day. Go One Pride, go Detroit Lions. We'll see you in the next one.
Rock on, Detroit.